Well, hi, welcome back. This is part 3. I'm going to try to keep it brief again. I just got done telling you about the Sodom and Gomorrah and the church. Actually, I didn't tell you too much about the church, but basically what happened was Moshe is an ex-military officer, and he was out on explorations, and they had decided to cut a road, and every time they cut a road, it seems like they find new finds. And so anyway, what happened was they cut a road and it went right between these two caves, and they were like, what is this? And so they stopped, of course, the process of that road. So when we got there, it was like, what is this? And we walked up, and again, nobody was around. We go up to this cave, and the cave is like really open because it had been cut in two. And he shows us up above on the tops of the ceiling that there was crosses. And so in my videos you'll see the crosses and you'll hear the explanation and so forth. But the purpose of it was that the church, the early church that was getting persecuted, they basically ran and basically hid in this church, and then they covered this church up, so this church was basically hidden. They actually purposely hid this church. So in the truly underground world of the church, in the first church. And he also believed that this is where a lot of the early Christians after Jesus had died had escaped out to Egypt. Along with the story again where Moses and Joseph had gone all these paths, the King Highway and so forth, because again you want to follow the route that all of them took generation to generation. Because God is into the little details. Now, back to our trip up in the Dead Sea, we stopped there, and of course, we saw this pillar that supposedly looked like the pillar that, it was Lot's wife that had turned to salt. Now, I don't know, most people don't, you can take that with a grain of salt. I'm just teasing. But anyway, we got to jump in the Dead Sea, and that was really cool. But Moshe was telling us that the Dead Sea is really not dead. In fact, all the life in it is dead in the sense of no living organisms. But God had created the Dead Sea for a purpose and a reason, to bless Israel. One of the things that he said that, this land is blessed. So you take the Dead Sea, and they've been processing the potassium and the other nutrients out of it, and now they have actually increased their crops. If they, like their palm dates were getting like, I don't know, probably 100 palms, per tree. And when they started using these nutrients and stuff, it was like, I think 150% increase on their productivity. And so the nutrients and the value of the stuff in the Dead Sea, even with skin, even with, treatments and stuff like this is why it's not, well, he believes it's not the Dead Sea, but the Sea of Life. Because what we see as dead, God sees opportunity and life, even ourselves. And this is a good parable, because when we die to ourselves, then God can live in us, and then it can, express in us. So we are dead, but yet Christ is living within us. So, taking that parable and going a little bit further, the parables are throughout the Bible for a reason, and so we haven't got that far yet. We're still on Moses. This was Moses' trek up to, the Promised Land, which, according to, the Bible, is this little piece of land. Again, a small piece of land in the city of David, which is small compared to like New York or something like that. So we finally arrive, and I'll just skip, the traveling and going up the coast, and we kind of, hear stories and stuff along the way, including the story of Masada. Now, a lot of people think, well, Masada was where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and so they thought, hey, this is a Christian place, and it was all cool. But the thing about Masada was, and this is things that, Moshe, you have to take into consideration. Again, you have to be open-minded with a whole bunch of stuff. The Masada basically committed suicide. There were 6,000 members that committed suicide. So kind of like Jim Jones, where he gave Kool-Aid and killed all these people. Now, Jim Jones was supposedly a Christian, although he was a cult, because he went and, according to the Bible, you're not supposed to kill yourself, and you're not supposed to do this and that and the other thing. And and this is why he believes that Masada was not, a godly compound, although there was a lot of different artifacts and stuff found along with the cult stuff as well. Now, along that route, we also we went up. Well, actually, I'll just skip to that, and we were in the city of David. Okay, first night it was awesome. Got to sleep and see the city of David on the way in. We got up early that morning. Now this is where it's going to get a little bit complicated because there's so much that happened, so many things. So I'm just going to cut a lot of it out and just try to give you the best nuggets that I can. Okay. We went up to the top of on top of Mount of Olives and overlooking the city of David. A lot of people go and they think, awesome, here's the eastern gate. The eastern gate is blocked up because what they did was they believed that Jesus was going to return through the east gate. So they created this like stuff that blocks it up. They put all these bricks and filled it all in. Then they went and also hold on a second. Anyway, the wind is blowing and I got a car coming. Okay, so where was I? Anyway, what happened was that the tombs and everything else along the Kidron Valley, which goes right along there, the Mount of Olives is here, and then the city of David and the walls. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff, like I said, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible and explain this. You got to be open-minded because there's a whole different stuff later on that I'll try to give you a little bit more information on. The Eastern Gate is clogged up because the Muslims didn't want Jesus to return there. The Jews didn't want Jesus to return there, so they put all these graves down in the Kidron Valley. Now, the early 1800s, Queen Helena, and this is the story because Moshe had told us that this is basically not the right location for the whole city of David and the walls. So, in fact, the Kidron Valley even is kind of a whole another story altogether. But we were overlooking the city of David, and he was telling us where the different quarters are. There's the Jewish quarter, there's the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, and so on. And this was cool because you got to see up on top of Mount of Olives the outline of the city. Now, one of the things about the garden, most gardens, and they believe that, and this is what they're doing with the tour companies, is they're bringing them up to the top of the mountain and saying this was where the garden was, where Jesus was, betrayed and all this. But back in the Old Testament, or I shouldn't say Old Testament, in Hebrew understanding was that a garden was something you went down to, not up to, you went down to. So the garden was down, not up. And so a lot of times we think, when we're going up to a garden, that's the wrong area. Now, I believe that Jesus was crucified and chose where he was going to be crucified, and also Moshe agrees with me, because the history and understanding, again, corresponds. Now, Jesus was just not your ordinary. Now, we're going to get into Jesus here in a little bit, but David is the first portion of what we're learning. We went from Moses, now we're going to David, and then we'll go into Jesus and where Jesus walked. So I'll do this next episode in the city of David, dealing with David. And right now we're talking about, we're overlooking on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the Kidron Valley into the city of David. Okay? And then I'll go into more detail as we go along. God bless you, and I hope you're learning something. And if you're not, then I'm sorry, I can't help you. Okay, talk to you soon.